Hi, I'm Monica. Welcome to another video. I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different today. I'm going to be talking about a really big passion of mine, it's video games, and specifically my own crackpot theories and ideas about the Kingdom Hearts III ReMind DLC and how it's kind of morphing into the game that never happened versus 13. Let's define some terms for those of you who are not familiar with Japanese RPGs. Final Fantasy is a long-running from 1987 video game series. Each installment in the series, each numbered installment, has its own lore, characters, and setting, and there have been 15, soon to be 16 numbered titles and tons of spin-offs. Kingdom Hearts is a newer series starting in 2002 that has been going for about 18 years now, since 2020, and I consider it just as good. It's a crossover between Square Enix and Disney properties, and if that sounds weird, it's because it is, but it's also really good and made a lot of people's childhoods. Tetsuya Nomura is the guy who has been mostly in charge of Kingdom Hearts from the beginning. He's also a really major character designer for the Final Fantasy series, like Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy X, you know, like really big ones, some of the most well-received ones that people really still play today. So let's do some history now so that you know what exactly I'm talking about. Development for Final Fantasy Versus 13 started in 2006. It was a PS3 game intended to be a spin-off set in the same universe as 13, 13-2, and Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns, Esquire Dr. Mrs. the Third. Nomura saw this as a chance to make a darker, grittier installment of Final Fantasy because installments like 2, 7, and 10 were not dark at all, right? However, the story arc in the 13 trilogy got super convoluted, ending in kind of a jump-the-shark fashion where the universe as the characters knew it kind of got turned into the real world, like present-day Earth. It was kind of like the ending of Battlestar Galactica, but if you didn't like the ending of Battlestar Galactica, just imagine something 1,000 times worse that you also don't like. Music was pretty kickin' though. So the world that trilogy took place in did not exist anymore by the end of the series. That might have been one reason why Versus 13 was changed to 15. And if you're wondering why we're skipping over 14, it's because 14 already existed by the time Versus 13 was happening and was an online game, was kind of a disaster. We're not going to talk about it, though they cleaned it up. Nomura had a very clear and ambitious idea for the game, planning to kind of show his own take on the series. He wanted to go in a darker direction than Kingdom Hearts, because Kingdom Hearts never gets dark. It's clear that Versus 13 was shaping up to be his magnum opus. Like, he was gearing up for a work that was like his Les Miserables or something. And just a fun fact. After seeing Les Miserables 2012, Tetsuya Nomura wanted to make Versus 13 a musical. An idea which was vetoed by everybody else on production. So, just for your information. However, in 2012, the game was rebranded in the form of 15. And Hajime Tabata replaced Tetsuya Nomura as director. Hajime Tabata has a pretty good track record. He directed the prequel to Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core, which is incredibly good and shares many qualities with the finished 15. Great humor and dialogue, realistic characters, well-written friendships, deep emotional weight. But he also has a tendency to leave things off-screen, making some plot points abrupt.
I never dreamed I'd be turned into an Angeal copy.
But I kind of give it a pass because of the other stuff mentioned before. He also directed Final Fantasy Type O, which was well received too, I believe. Haven't played it though. Back on track, Nomura and Tabata were actually co-directors until 2013. Lots of character and story elements were removed, like 420 Prompto, and most controversially, the anti-heroine Stella. Stella was replaced by the traditional and more heroic character Luna Freya, who never takes on the role of rival to Noctis, who's the hero. Lots of people following the development of the game were mad about that, annoyed that the more active female lead was replaced with a seemingly passive one. We'll talk about that more another time, but it was a big controversy, which I find a little bit silly. Why exactly do female characters have to, have to be judged so much more harshly than their male counterparts? Like, for example, one of the 3 secondary protagonists of 15, Prompto, who, for the record, is a dude, is in peril so much more than Lunafreya. He is literally held captive in a tower at one point, and you have to climb the tower and rescue him. Lunafreya, in contrast, is not in a position of helplessness and needing rescue, and is actually an active and strong-willed woman. But because she doesn't have a sword and a scalpel, she's just helpless and weak, right? Anyway, when that project was rebranded, according to Tabata, Versus 13 was only 25% to 30% finished, without a full-fledged plot or ending in sight. So now we've got a lot of annoyed fans passionately defending an unfinished game and comparing it to a finished game, one that can't possibly live up to the specific desires of every single person who is following the development of Versus 13. And I get it, being disappointed that something you were looking forward to being suddenly, and then having it be suddenly cancelled after a lot of hype, it's really disappointing. And honestly, it's kind of on the devs for hyping it up so much when they themselves knew that it was half finished and they didn't know how to end it. So, that's a lot of information. What does that have to do with Kingdom Hearts 3's DLC ReMind? XIII was very long coming. As a near lifelong fan, I can attest to that. The game itself is kind of polarizing. Some people, like me, loved it, others hated it. However, it was a conclusion. It was open-ended by virtue of being kind of a bittersweet ending, but it was a conclusion to a very long story arc. The series wasn't over, but a 20-year-long story arc was finally done, and we got some sweet moments along the way, so even if you didn't like the way it ended, there was probably something for you to like in the game. Then we have the ReMind DLC. The DLC offered the chance to play some crazy hard new bosses and be able to play as different characters during story fights where in the main game you were Sora. It also gave us more Yozora. Yozora was literally a gag character. In the Toy Story world, we see posters and displays for an in-universe game called Verum Rex, starring an anime-looking dude called Yozora. It was a funny joke because you have the Toy Story characters assuming that Sora was an action figure in the game. It was a silly, self-aware joke. A joke. Well, surprise, because it turns out in the secret ending of 3, Yozora is an actual, real dude in the world of Kingdom Hearts. Then, the DLC came out, and things got even crazier. So, at the end of KH3, Sora is pretty much dead, and wakes up in the final world, where he meets Noctis. I mean, Yozora. He says his duty is to save Sora, and a boss fight ensues. If you lose, he straight up turns Sora into crystal, which is something that happens to people in the 13 lore. Yozora says he's done his objective. If you win, he says he's not needed, and he dips. Now, Yozora reeks of fanfic insert character, for one thing. Even if he wasn't basically Noctis, he still reminds me of Poochie from The Simpsons, who was a super cool new character that they put into Itchy and Scratchy and just made all the other characters look lame. So a super cool new character, so much more awesome and powerful than the existing characters. He's got heterochromia, he's overpowered, he's mysterious, he's moody, and his name is a direct mirror to Sora's name. Yozora means night sky, and Sora just means sky. Noctis means night, by the by. If you describe this character out of context to me, I would assume that he was like an OC or something, like off DeviantArt. And I'm not out to slam OCs on DeviantArt because that stuff is fun to do. Getting back on track, his game, Verum Rex, means True King, which is something Noctis is constantly referred to in 15. When Sora asks him who he is, he replies that, "This isn't my real face." I see, because he's actually Noctis. And Stella, remember her, is also kind of in the game too, in the final world. In the main game, Sora encounters a star, or soul, in the final world who says that her name and everything about her has been stolen. And that her closest friend has been changed beyond recognition, replaced with the heart of another. Okay then. Also, in the in-universe trailer for Verum Rex, one of Yozora's friends looks exactly like one of Noctis' friends from 15, Ignis. And I don't just mean, oh my gosh, he has glasses, they're the same. I mean, he literally has the same face. All of this just comes across as kind of salty to me. I'm definitely not demonizing Nomura. Being salty is something that we all do, especially when we're really invested in projects and we get suddenly kicked off of them. This guy gave me and my siblings great childhood and young adult memories, too. And one of my fondest memories as a child is sitting on my dad's lap at the age of 6 and playing a real video game for the first time. And that's the game this guy made. I'm grateful for that, and I think he's got a real good knack for unique settings and characters, and I think that He kind of reminds me of Stephen Moffat, who wrote for Doctor Who. Like, he makes crazy plots that sometimes get out of hand, but the storytelling is really charming and very genuine. It comes from a very genuine place, and it's really enjoyable, and he's really talented. He's really good. So the point of this video isn't to slam anyone. I just think it's really interesting how the saltiness about being removed from the Versus 13 project and having that turned into something else is seeping into a project or series that he has pretty much full control over. I really love Kingdom Hearts, though, you know, for me, maybe it stops at 3. I'm not sure where the plot's going. I have more issues with where it's going than just Yozora. If it's good, though, that's cool. I'll really enjoy it. The way it's going just seems kind of, I don't know. It's a little bit salty. It's getting a little bit convoluted, but that's okay. We'll see what happens. So anyways, that's my video ranting about the ReMind DLC and about how Yozora is basically Noctis. And I hope that you enjoyed me ranting, and have a good day. Bye.